and welcome to the webinar. We are excited to have you here as part of our Pathlock webinar series today. Our title for this webinar is Ariba outside your SAP Access Control scope? Learn how to integrate. My name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the webinar manager here at Pathlock. Our presenter today will be Susan Stapleton, who will introduce herself in just a moment. But before we proceed, I just have a few housekeeping items. If you have any audio trouble during this webinar, you can click on audio on your control panel, and from there you can click to see what speaker you're using and see if your audio is working. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this session. Everyone is on mute to prevent background noise, but if you have any questions, we would love to answer those at the end of this session, so you can type in the questions box that you'll find on your control panel. And from there, we will answer any questions at the end of the event. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Susan.
Thanks, Stephanie. So my name is Susan Stapleton, and I help support our SAP customers here at Pathlock. I've been doing GRC-related activities for 20 years now. I was at Anheuser-Busch when SOX came about and went out looking for a solution to help me automate SOD management, and started working with Versa, then SAP, and I joined SAP and was responsible for the GRC solutions there for quite some time until I joined Pathlock. And at Pathlock, which was previously known as Greenlight, our business has been helping customers extend their scope of compliance out to other business applications and just provide automation wherever we can. Today, I'm going to provide more of a kind of a tactical session, specifically talking about how to work with Ariba, identify user risk, compliantly provision access to Ariba and SAP when you start bringing in cloud applications, user access reviews, SOD reviews, and even emergency access management. So while access control firefighting is pretty ABAP specific, customers do need or have a requirement to do emergency access management or privileged access management for some of the cloud solutions. So I'm going to dive into that as well. And I'm going to talk about how to think about SOD management if your organization has started adopting cloud solutions like Ariba, like Workday, Salesforce, and others, because I guarantee you that trend is just really starting to kick in, and customers will have 5, 10, 15 cloud applications before long, probably. And then we'll go into Q&A. So a lot of customers, hopefully you have, if you're on this webinar, you have access control, or maybe you're getting ready to acquire access control. And there are thousands of SAP customers that are using this solution. And it's because it works and it has filled any requirements related to user access governance for many, many, many years. You can have it fully deployed, meaning you have robust workflows. You might have hundreds of business users using access control to request and approve access to SAP. And it delivers access governance that allows you to comply with any of your external or internal audits when it comes to managing and providing access to SAP. One critical issue I think that was on hold for a lot of customers is access control didn't have a roadmap. After version 12, it was kind of end of life. So after the GRC conference last year, I think a lot of people heard that access control is pretty critical to some of your processes. So the solution management development teams have announced that there will be another version, a subsequent version to GRC 12.0. It's going to be called, I wrote it down, SAP GRC Edition for SAP HANA, and it's going to cover access control, process control, and risk management, the three GRC solutions, the primary ones. So Q1 2026, that's planned. So if you are waiting to see what was going to happen with access control or how to manage governance, risk, and compliance going forward, at least you have a roadmap and SAP has a vision to continue on with SAP access control. I think that's pretty critical to kind of think about as you're looking for your solution to cover you for access governance for the next few years, really. Enterprises are going to have a very robust user access governance solution. You're going to be dealing with hybrid environments, as I said, with both on-premise, maybe cloud ERP or cloud applications. A lot of these applications have extremely different security authorization concepts, and this drives the need more and more for automation. It's impossible to manage monitoring access and segregation of duties when all of these business applications have completely different access authorization models. The good old days of access control was when everything was in SAP and you could manage all of your risks, which were specific to SAP ERP within your access control solution. You didn't have to worry about different user IDs. You didn't have to worry about different authorization concepts. Access control fit the bill for your business processes and monitoring user access because everything was in SAP. I just pulled here like the first 30 risk of the out-of-the-box SOD rule set that's delivered with access control. Has been for years. And whether your risk included functions for procurement, inventory, payables, assets, vendors, pricing, all of the procure-to-pay or supply chain type SODs were managed consistently and comprehensively with your SOD rule set. You could have started with the out of the box. You could have developed your own SOD rule set. You could have implemented one that your partner gave you. But the fact of the matter is your rule set really is everything when it comes to segregation of duties, clean roles, compliant access. All of those things really rely on a robust and comprehensive SOD rule set. When you added custom T codes, a different way to create purchase orders, or you added PO document types that were custom PO document types, new inventory movements, or even additional posting keys if you configured new ones for financial transactions. All of those things should have been reflected in your SOD rule set. So when the business introduced something new in SAP, there should have been some type of process between the business, IT, security, and the admin of GRC to come in here and update this SOD risk set, whether it was related to HR payroll, inventory management, or procurement. Well before the move to S4, although the S4 has triggered a lot of cloud adoption, but even before that, a lot of SAP organizations were adopting primarily Ariba Cloud and SuccessFactors Cloud. If customers didn't adopt a procurement cloud solution like Ariba, they adopted Coupa, Jaggaer, Tradeshift, any number of other business procurement applications that were available on the market. And typically, if they didn't adopt SuccessFactors, they adopted Workday. So as these activities that were always in SAP, creating purchase orders, maintaining employees, whatever those things were, your rule set was covering it. But now when those things move outside of SAP, you're not able to monitor those on an automated or efficient way. So if you just think about Ariba, which is what this webinar is about, purchasing and activities related to purchasing may move completely or partially outside of ERP. And I say partially because companies tend to adopt different things when they're adopting a cloud solution. They don't go 100% on day one. A lot of companies we find are adopting things like contracts and sourcing as the first go live for Ariba. They may do indirect purchasing only through Ariba, different things like that. So it's not like 100% of your procurement activity just automatically shifts out of ERP into Ariba. And it's very important to understand, just like new T codes or new objects, what activities now are happening outside of core, and specifically, are they everything happening outside, or am I still buying out of SAP and buying out of Ariba? Those things are really important for you to be aware of because you need to update your risk set. So you need to understand, as the owner of your SOX controls, your SOD management group, your compliance internal controls, how do you make sure you don't start missing user risk that you were previously reporting? And you were reporting on them because it was all in access control. You can do it manually. You can set up dummy processes. Specifically for Ariba, there was a lot of documentation around setting up dummy roles and using those to do your SOD risk analysis, setting up dummy roles that could transfer into a way to provision access in Ariba using access control. You could also set up a direct connection and configure one time a connection between access control and Ariba and map to the security authorization concept so that when you run a batch risk analysis, an ad hoc risk analysis, or even simulate risk real time, you'll be able to understand what users have access to do in Ariba, as well as SAP, giving you that cross-system SOD risk analysis. The way we do this is to understand the authorization concept of whatever cloud procurement system you're using, or HR system, or CRM, SRM, or even if you're a company that buys another company that's running Oracle Fusion, Dynamics, whatever the case may be. We can understand those security authorization concepts and map that data back into access control, into what it needs to understand the equivalent of a role, T-code, objects, fields, and values. What are those things in Ariba or other applications? And this is how we can provide very fine-grained SOD risk analysis and do an apples-to-apples comparison always based on permissions in SAP versus permissions in Ariba, so that we can tell you who can create purchase orders and approve them in Ariba and pay vendors out of SAP ERP, which is a typical SOD that is going to be in your procurement risk. So I'm going to show you now nothing more than access control screens, because it really is a one-time connection and mapping of user information, role information, and authorization information from a cloud app like Ariba to bring it into access control. And then you simply run your periodic repository sync jobs against an additional system, in this case Ariba. And that's going to bring in high-level user, role, and objects or authorization object data coming from Ariba. And that's going to allow you to update your master data here. So if you look at your procurement risk, now I just have the first 8, but still, these procurement risk may not change one bit. Your initial ones that you're monitoring, especially if you're going to start doing purchasing in Ariba, but you're going to keep some level of purchasing in SAP ERP. In that case, your rule set is what your rule set is, and you need to start thinking about, what am I doing in Ariba? You can have single system risk in Ariba. You can have critical actions, critical permissions, critical roles, and you can have segregation of duties that all are within the Ariba single system itself. And if you take a look and just say, maybe I'm going to move my procurement, my purchasing, my buyer or buying, that's what I'm moving to Ariba first, that actually requires me to change my SOD rule sets. If you look at those first 30 risk again, more than 20 of them will now need to have a cross-system risk set up, because I'm maintaining purchase orders in Ariba, but I'm still doing invoicing, receipts, payments, and inventory transactions within my core ERP. So right off the bat, if you look at just your out-of-the-box procurement risk, there are a lot here, more than 20 of the initial 30 of this first page that's going to have to go to a cross-system risk analysis. Then you may need to set up, or you'll need to come in and set up your cross-system risk. In this case, I want to know who's purchasing items and processing payments. And so this is a cross-application risk. And when I look at that, I'm going to see that I'm buying. And for this risk, I want to know who's buying from Ariba and who is paying from SAP. And if you look at this, this is standard access control functionality. If one or more of your functions is set as cross-system, when you go to generate your rule set for this particular risk, it will build out a cross-system. It'll say, show me users that can buy in Ariba and pay vendors out of SAP. And that will be your cross-system risk. And you can run your report in access control against that. So if I go into my user risk violations report, I'm going to run against Ariba and S4 all in one go. So I can run all my systems against a cross-system. And when I look at my reporting coming out of access control, again, this is SAP Access Control UI, then I'll see that my risk is because the user has the ability to do one function in Ariba and the second function in SAP. From this screen, you can do anything you want to do. If you think about what you're doing today with your risk analysis reports, are you exporting it? Are you downloading it and sending to TIBCO or different types of Tableau, different types of reporting solutions or data warehouses? Do you have some kind of automatic email notification going out to users that you attach these things to? None of that has to change. Absolutely nothing, because all you're doing is including more systems into your scope, but any processes you've built around this, you can just continue on with those processes. All right, I think I touched on everything there I wanted to touch on. Let me move on to provisioning. So access control was really built to provision access to SAP. And that's a pretty black and white authorization concept. However, if you need to provision access to something like a cloud solution, there could be anywhere from 10 to 30 user attributes that's required to provision access. For Ariba, you're going to need things like purchasing orgs, approval limits. You may need plants. You may need all kinds of information that will tell you, how to create and keep users up to date in an Ariba cloud solution. But I can come in and request access to Ariba, just like I request access to SAP. Typically, customers have workflows set up. I'm going to give you an example of the one I see 90% of the time. The user's manager will be the first reviewer and approver, and the role owner will be the second approver. So in this case, because we're doing a repository sync against Ariba, the roles for Ariba will come in. You can go into your business role management, assign attributes, who's the owner, the customer approver determinator based on location, whatever those things are. All of that, again, is just standard access control functionality, but you're going to do it for Ariba roles. And then if you have a process built in to prevent new risk from happening in your business applications, now your simulation of risk will go out real time and see, what does this user have access to do in SAP? What do they have access to do in Ariba? And what are they requesting access to do? And will that role or roles cause additional conflicts? And here you can see they're requesting an S4 role that will cause them to have new conflicts unless you mitigate from here. And again, whatever you're doing today, you can do here. Go select a mitigation, assign it to this risk, and continue on and approve this request. The other thing that we typically do for things like Ariba or other cloud applications is we may have to go to additional source systems. Typically, your access control system is probably connected to either SuccessFactors, Active Directory, someplace to get user to manager information, and maybe some other critical user attributes. That would be just to create users in SAP. But now I need to create a user in Ariba, and so therefore I'm going to go get additional information. Like I said, approval limits, purchasing orgs, purchasing groups, cost centers, general ledger accounts. All of these things may be required to create a new user in Ariba. So we'll fetch that data. We may configure the request a little bit different, add some fields into that, but we can map and send this to Ariba when we create that user or change that user. The other thing I will say is that if the source data changes, we constantly poll that source system and say, okay, my approval limit in SuccessFactors just moved from $50,000 to $100,000. We can pick that up and say there was a change. We'll pick that up and push it to the user's record in Ariba, and we just use a zero-stage workflow. So people don't have to approve that unless you want to stop it on a request and have someone approve it, but most customers just let it flow through so that Ariba always stays up to date with whatever your source data is. So your record of truth will be remaining in this source detail. This is just some examples of user attributes we typically pick up and push into Ariba when we create users. So, and we go fetch this from different sources. It doesn't have to be SuccessFactors, it could be Workday, it could be any number of applications that you have in your environment. One other thing I want to say here real quick, a lot of customers are using HR triggers in access control. That is a fabulous functionality. You can also set up HR triggers to Workday, but if you have an HR trigger come through and the employee is terminated or the employee transfers, you can kick off a request that will, or a ticketing, that will generate a request and show either the new user's manager or the old manager what that user has access to do currently, and have them review that. None of that has to change either. Just think about a termination request, though, can come through and flow through and terminate access to Ariba, to SAP, to Salesforce, any of the applications that are connected And that's a pretty big ROI as well. Another thing to think about is from an audit or controls or SOX perspective, all of your stakeholders using access control for auditing and looking at audit logs continue to go into access control for audit logs. It's just that Ariba will be shown there. Your rules for Ariba will be shown in your change log for your risks, your user access reviews, and so on. All of that audit trail is within access control itself. Huge, huge ROI. And if you, just kind of step back and think about it, if you had role owners approving requests for access to procurement roles in SAP, and they were using access control, and you bring Ariba into this, typically those role owners and approvers, they're already familiar with access control. Now they're just approving requests that show Ariba roles being assigned. So there's a big adoption value here too, that you don't have to train your end users, because your Ariba users used to be your SAP ERP users and reviewers. All right, so now I'm going to talk about firefighting and emergency access management. This is the piece that we do separate from the access control UI. If you need access for firefighting to cloud solutions and audit logging for what your firefighters or privileged users are doing in those applications, we can provide that for all of the cloud solutions or many of the cloud solutions, but it will be through our own UI. So a firefighter would need to come in and request a role to firefight in a business application. Here you can see that I can request for any system that I have a connection to, Salesforce, BTP, Workday, whatever the case may be. So you'll have one system for firefighting for SAP ERP, and that will be access control. All other elevated access requests would come through Pathlock, and you would select the system you need to have firefighting access to. And there'll be a certain number of roles, probably, you can identify these, that would be available to select for firefighting. These roles probably would not be able to be selected for a normal access. So things like admin, which give everybody keys to the kingdom to some of these cloud solutions, you'll want to flow through some type of firefighter emergency access process. I can request access for 10 minutes to unlimited number of hours. And then I just enter other information that you may want to make required. This is just configuration, what you want to have the requester fill in here. And then the last thing we do is just in this demo scenario, accept terms and conditions, saying I'm going to do only firefighting activities, and I know it's all going to be logged, and I know someone's going to review everything that I'm doing. And then I submit this request. In Pathlock, as an owner, I'm going to see my request to approve, and then I'm going to see requests that I need to review. So in this case, I'm going to come in and look at my firefight log that I need to review, and it's going to show me information around that request and the employee. It's also going to have a file, or it'll show inline in the request itself the changes that the user made while they had that elevated access. And this is pretty simple, but I'm not sure we know how to go in and do a ton in Ariba itself, but we can track everything that happens, and it's more of a, I don't know, English type of review. So you can see that we changed currency, language, name, changed currency back again, or the default currency, and the location. But you can see that Euro was changed to a dollar, Danish was changed to English, and so on. So if you think about some of these cloud solutions like Ariba, the audit log is massive. It's capturing absolutely everything that anybody is doing, and auditors will tell you it's impossible to get through. And auditors typically want to see things in Ariba. They want to know who went in and created a user with the admin role. They want to know who changed a user. They want to know who went in and created a purchase order, approved a purchase order, or changed a purchase order. And they want to know if anybody changed configuration. Those are the things that auditors want you to be able to report on, specifically for Ariba. And those things are things that we could do automatically here without someone having to go through and look at absolutely everything that's in that audit log. So that's an example of being able to approve the audit log for SAP Ariba. It's an integration admin role that was assigned. And then a lot of other information is shown, when the access was requested, approved, how long they had it, and so on. So all of this very similar to the access control firefighting. We call it emergency or elevated access management. And this is within Pathlock Cloud, but it's one process for all of your cloud firefighting. All right, I think I'm talking really fast, but that's okay. Stephanie wanted me to do a webinar. I'm like, I don't know that I can talk more than 10 or 15 minutes on an integration. Obviously, that's not the case. There's actually a lot to talk about. So, but this is kind of my last section, and it's really thinking about your strategy early on. So we tend to talk about things like out-of-the-box rule sets, but basically what we're delivering is content. No one can tell you or anybody else what your cross-system risks will be. And it could be various iterations, and it's always going to change. But we can provide and do provide out-of-the-box content. So there's like 33 things that you want to monitor in Ariba. Remittances, invoicing, and that's if you adopt everything in Ariba. There's 4 or 5 modules. It's not like an infinite number of things you can do in Ariba. Invoices, payments, if you adopt those things, receive services, maintain purchase orders, approve purchase orders, requisitions, things like that. So we can give you the content to understand what does a user need to be able to do those activities in Ariba. It will be up to you to work with your business to set up your risks. But, you know, it's not like it's a whole nother ERP. It's not hundreds of thousands of things. It's really just these best of breed cloud solutions, the 30 or 40 functions that you'll need to monitor. And then you need to have that very good relationship with your business and your project teams to understand as things move out. When I talk about setting your strategy early, it's keeping your risk list up to date. But more importantly is when you first start adopting cloud solutions, you need to set your strategy. If you start doing workarounds or manual processes, it's going to lock you in potentially into a state that's not going to be very sustainable for anybody. Because if Ariba is the first one you adopt, just think if I start adopting a warehouse management solution and all of my inventory transactions, my scrapping, my receipts, my issues, all of them, my inventory counts, all of that starts happening outside of SAP warehouse management or SAP ERP. Now I have several more risks that will be cross-system. And many of those risks could be cross Ariba and warehouse management. If you're like some of our customers and you have 3 function risk, you could have 3 business applications included for one SOD. I want to know who can create purchase orders in Ariba, receive my goods into warehouse management, and pay the vendor out of SAP. I mean, that is impossible to do in a manual or workaround way. And the third application, a lot of people are adopting master data governance solutions. This will impact all of your business process areas, not just procurement, but your customers, your general ledger accounts, your material masters, your vendor masters, all of that starts moving outside of core SAP as well. So this starts to get to be a big mismatch of where these activities are happening. So if you have access control today, I think the one thing to consider is it can be your go-forward solution. You can pull in all of these other applications into access control. You can do an apples-to-apples comparison. And for many of the cloud applications, when we do the integrations, we can provide you content. And that's function definitions or activity definitions of how these activities take place in things like Workday, Coupa, Salesforce, Ariba, Manhattan, whatever those applications are. All right. And just kind of here is talking about, we can also do user access reviews and SOD reviews. And with those, all of the applications of how you would send a campaign out, you would be able to send it to a supervisor for a user, but now that user access review would contain the roles for all of the systems that are connected to access control. Same thing could be an SOD review here as well. And if we've automated or enabled provisioning, if I have a user access review that comes to me and this employee is no longer with the company, if I make that known here in the action, all of this access would be indated or removed once I approve this request and send it on. So huge ROI for user access reviews and access control as well. So again, if you have access control, we can help you bring in other applications, automate everything from risk analysis to compliant provisioning to user reviews, have access control be your one source of truth. Another thing I just want to say is that a lot of applications like Ariba and Workday, Ariba has SOD reports that you can run in Ariba, but that'll never tell you that that same user has access to do 15 other things in SAP or warehouse management. So it's a very siloed approach and it will only get you so far. So anyway, I wanted to say that. What else? These cloud applications too provide a lot of ways to stop SODs within the application. You can configure it that if I can do function 1 in Ariba, I cannot do function 2. And again, those are great controls and they should be deployed for sure. But again, that user typically will also have access to other business systems. So the cross system has to kind of be one of your strategies to make sure you know what these users have access to do. All right, so use access control to automate access. Make sure that you grant and revoke access at the right time, whether it's for firefighters or it's just users that come and go, get hired, terminated, transferred. Monitor everything. Again, use the HR triggers. Make sure you know what users have access to do, no matter what the business application is on the back end of that. Be able to monitor for excessive or unintentional access and make sure you're always doing it at a fine-grained level. Even if you have an identity management solution like SailPoint, Savient, it's only going to get you so far. It's going to give you a lot of false reports and it'll be a maintenance nightmare. Use access control to continue to be your granular, fine-grained SOD risk analysis so you don't have to deal with false reports. And be audit ready. Access control has tons of audit logs. Those audit logs will now contain requests for Ariba, campaigns for user access reviews for Ariba, your rule sets for Ariba that cross Ariba and SAP. All of those are in your change logs in your existing access control reports. All right, Stephanie, I think that's all I have for today. So let's see if we got any questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, Susan, for that presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please add them now into the questions box and we would be happy to answer those. Our first question is, how many systems do you have out of the box rule sets for?
Okay, so good question. It's a question we get every time we have a conversation with a customer. What can you provide me out of the box? Again, I think we don't have out of the box rule sets for these other applications unless you want one for Dynamics or PeopleSoft or other ERPs. What we provide is content. What do you typically need to monitor in a cloud solution, and how do users get access to do that? What authorizations do they need to process sales orders and maintain pricing in Salesforce and so on? So that's the kind of content we have, and we have multiple cloud applications. I would say anywhere from 15 to 20 of the more primary cloud solutions, especially procurement and so on. But yeah, I mean, it's a conversation depending on what cloud application it is. And we're constantly getting more and more content that we can deliver. So it's an ongoing process.
Okay, great. Our next question is there a limit to how many systems can be integrated?
No, I mean, I know customers that have 300 SAP instances integrated to access control. When we first started integrating systems into access control, it was a 1 or 2 systems, but now customers are licensing 10, 15, or we have one customer that has almost 50 systems integrated. And that's because they're using cloud solutions that are specific by plant. So as many plants as they have as many systems as we have connected in. So it depends on what kind of the systems they are, how they get integrated. But no, there is no limit to how many systems we can bring into access control.
Okay, great. And our next question is, can you still use the logical rule set methodology when you connect to a cloud application like Salesforce or Coupa?
Okay, so the logical rules, I think, is to help you ease the maintenance of SOD rules and access control. You create logical groups or logical systems. If you want the rules to be the same across multiple ERP systems, I think is the typical thing. So there is nothing different when we start bringing in these other applications. You can still use logical systems or logical rules to manage both SAP and cloud systems within access control. Good question.
Okay, that's all the questions we have for today. But I do want to encourage you, if you have any more questions, you can reach out to us at info@pathlock.com, or you can reach out to Susan. She has her email address right here, and we would be happy to answer any of your questions. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at future webinar events.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, everybody.